Hi everyone, welcome to Casual Watch Talk Sunday Social. Welcome to my panel, thanks for joining. I'm joined by Todd from TikTok Talk, Nicholas from Fears, Dave from Scottish Watches, and Mark from also Instagram, but on Liberty. Yeah. Oh, and Scottish Watches, yeah. Well, welcome everyone. Hi Kevin, thanks for joining us. Hey Eric, thank you for being early. Today we're going to talk about the Hodinkee article, but before we do that, let's do a wristwatch check. So, Mark, I'll start with you. What are you wearing?
So today I am wearing a Speedmaster Mark II, the Racing Dial edition, and this is the 2014 re-release.
Nice.
Very, very nice.
Nice.
Dave, what's on your wrist?
I am also on the Omega account. I have the Ultra Deep.
Oh, wow.
Nice. That's a chunky boy, but very nice.
it's a lump. There's no two ways about it. But yeah, it's very nice.
But it wears it well.
But actually, it's very comfy on. It's just not particularly shirt cuff friendly in any way, shape, or form. But actually, it's really good. It's very like the Ploprof, kind of like it's big, but when you've got it on, you kind of forget you've got it on, which is a good thing until you basically take out a small granny as you're walking up the street.
Are they difficult to get, Dave? Or did you have to wait? Were you on a waiting list for it?
I've had it for a little while, but by all accounts, they're quite hard to get. So yes, maybe no, possibly, whatever.
They are dribbling in very slowly into the boutiques in the US, but you've got to pretty much have paid a deposit 6 months ago for it.
I think it falls into the camp of what most brands are doing, which is drop the limited edition and just don't make very many, or certainly bleed them out. You know, this whole limited production model seems to be becoming more and more the norm with many brands these days. Sadly,
it seems to be driving the boutiques crazy because they've got people coming in wanting to see them, and they're just not there.
Yeah, I was watching something about the American car industry, and that a lot of the main brands, Ford and everything, they're only supplying the dealers with the fully kitted out cars, the top spec ones. So the average price for a Ford F-150 is $66,000 now, because the Ford is just providing the top spec ones. So I wonder, I mean, surely that'll never backfire. But anyway, Nicholas, should we go to you next, or should we go to you? Nicholas, should we go to you next, or should we go to you last?
No, you can go to me next. So
okay.
I'm wearing my mule watch, which is it looks like a Brunswick 40.
Oh, nice.
But this watch is a very weird watch. I wear this a lot because the case is the prototype from the Topper edition. This is a pre-production sample dial and handset. The bracelet is actually made out of 2 prototype bracelets, which is why we don't have the full colored enamel on the Bristol flowers in the clasp. And now the watch is being powered by a prototype model of a Le Jeux Perret movement. So this watch is basically a mule. It's like whenever we need to test something, the watch gets taken off my wrist, it goes to the watchmaker, gets played around with, and then it comes back to me. And it was funny, I was talking to George Bamford about this and about how it's frustrating running a watch company because you never actually get to wear like the newest, like production ready watches. And he laughed and was like, he's the exact same. So when you see the watches on his wrist, he's like, they're always a bit Frankenstein. Like they're always like made out of this, you know, the fact that they tick is a miracle. And it's the same with me. So like if you see a watch on my wrist, it's going to be like something is being tested on it. So but it's good. It's and it's running to, well, every day it's gaining either 1 second or losing 1 second. So I'm quite happy with that as a movement test, you know. And that's real world wearing it, you know, moving around, bashing it against my desk. So yeah, that's what I've got on my wrist tonight.
Wow, cool. Awesome, a piece unique, as they would say in there.
Exactly.
Todd, what are you wearing?
I shifted gears tonight. I was going with quartz after our conversation last week, but then I bounced back to my old faithful Tudor Black Bay 36 because I heard a rumor, I don't know if we'll ever discuss it, but that these are no longer available to be ordered from your AD. So I'm curious as to what's happening. Yeah. I don't know if they're going to go with an in-house movement or if theirs are disappearing, but I love this watch.
No, that is interesting. Yeah. Well, maybe we'll have to ask our friendly neighborhood Tudor AD. I'll have to message him.
Oh, you should. That's right. I forgot you got to connect. We got to call him.
Yeah, absolutely. I am wearing, I've just done a review of this. I'm reviewing, this is a Casio Edifice. It's $100 and it's awesome. Like it's like, obviously it looks a bit like a Royal Oak and it's also a bit like a PRX. In fact, I'm going to compare it in a video against the PRX, which I've got here, which was kindly sent in. So yeah, interesting watch, really. I don't normally review the Casio Edifice watch. In fact, I haven't since the very first video I ever did was a Casio Edifice. So, but watch Chris got me on this one. I'm quite impressed with it for $100, sapphire crystal and everything. Awesome.
Oh, I need to check this out.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, the reason that I was asking Nicholas whether he wanted to go last was just in case you happened to be wearing the new watch that was announced. But I would love to kick this off with talking about the big launch.
Oh, and I wish I was wearing it tonight. I have to say, I mean, it's tempting to always end up saying like, oh, every new watch launch is the favorite, but I really do love this watch. And it was the weird thing was when it first arrived, like ready for me to like sign off on the first sample build, I wasn't in Bristol, and so it sat on my desk in a box. And then I arrived at in the office, and I wouldn't open the box for like 3 hours because I was so scared I might not like it because it was so different from anything we'd done before. But the moment I opened it, I fell in love with it. And yeah, it's a special watch. This week is going to be a very strange week because usually so I was getting messages on Friday from other watch brands going like, hey, like congratulations on the launch, how's it going? And I'm like, oh no, we don't start selling them for a week. Like it doesn't go on sale until the 27th.
Oh really?
Because yeah, so basically it's available to buy to the club members of the British Watch and Clockmakers Alliance. So I was like, well, the thing is, if you make it live on the site and you say, right, this is the way you buy it, it's just going to be a crazy scramble for people to like sign up to the club, to then get the password, and I was just like, that's not how I like to do limited editions. I'm very much like, no, give people like a runway to it. So there isn't that FOMO of like rushing. So yeah, we're basically giving people a week to become a club member of the Alliance. And yeah, it will go live on Friday. And basically anyone who is a club member by Thursday midnight GMT will receive the password on Friday morning. And to help out with the folks in California, it goes live at 3 p.m. UK time, so like 7 a.m. California. So hopefully that gives everyone as fair a chance to like be online if they want to buy one.
So it's a collaboration with Christopher Ward, and when you sent me the first picture, I'll let you explain this, but my guess is that it's obviously it's got the Fears case, the Fears finishing, and the band, but the movement is the movement that's in the Meistersinger watch is the Bell Aura, the one that they adapted to the Bel Canto, I'm guessing. Is their jump?
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, so the JJ01 is their first developed in-house module, which is the jump hour. So they've had so they've got their own movement, the SH21, and then they've got 4 modules. So the JJ01 is jump hour, JJ02 is a monopusher, 03 is a world timer, and 04 is the moon phase, like the giant moon phase. And right back at the very beginning, they were saying, look, we want to use one of our movements, and which one would you like to use? And I immediately said the jump hour. I mean, back in 2016, when I was restarting Fears, I always dreamt one day that we would do a Brunswick with a jump hour, but jump hour movements don't exist. Like there are no off-the-shelf jump hours. You just can't buy them. So it has to be a specially developed thing. So that for me is exciting because I've always wanted to do it, but there's never been a possibility. Now, a few people have said like a couple of things. One is, it's limited edition to 50 pieces. Why are we only making 50 of them? Well, when we first conceived this back in the end of 2020, just after the Alliance was founded, we were kind of going, well, how many should we do? Now, in 2020, Fears at the time had done its greatest number of watches, which was about 150. Last year, when we were making these watches, we made 480 watches. So the 50 Alliance 01s actually account for more than 10% of our total annual production. And so it's that thing of going like, well, it'd be lovely to say we made 100 or 200, but like, we just are such a small company and our production's so low that we're not able to do that. But the other thing, which I think is quite a nice Easter egg, is also you're saying collaboration. You're saying, yeah, but it's got Fears on the dial. It carries a Fears serial number. Yes, the movement is Christopher Ward, but there's no co-branding on the front. It's only on the lugs on the rear of it, and But the big thing where Christopher Ward came in and what their massive contribution to this watch is, which I'm not sure everyone knows because of the number of comments about like, well, beyond the movement, what else have Christopher Ward done? Their design team designed this watch.
Yeah, wow.
So this was them going away, looking at the Fears collection and the archive and going, right, we're going to create a Fears jumping hour watch. But like, for me, it's just fascinating that they hit the nail on the head so well. I think, it's so undoubtedly a Fears watch. And yet it's incredible to think this came out of the minds of a different company's design team. Like it was very, very, it was strange, but very, very pleasing and very humbling to realize after like at the time, 4 or 5 years, that we had such a strong DNA that someone else could actually interpret it so clearly and so cleanly.
Yeah, that's amazing. And Mike's gone on the record on this channel that this is the most accurate jumping hour that's ever been created.
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, the crazy thing is with this is you don't realize quite often jumping hours won't jump. They won't go like a date disc does, a quick date at 12. Basically it will come up to 60 minutes and it will begin to adjust and then slowly adjust. Whereas this, it snaps within a split second. But the thing that I find so pleasing is the sound and the sensation of that disc changing from 1 hour to the next. The first thing people who went hands-on said is it feels like a camera shutter.
Oh yeah.
It's got that almost like a kind of, it's almost like a stroke. It's sort of, the way it goes is just beautiful. It just feels, it's quite mesmerizing watching the hour just change over, which when you think about it, you're like, how often do you get excited when your watch gets to 0:00?
Yeah, well, it's incredible, and so there's still a chance, isn't there? People can sign up to the British Watch and Clockmakers Association, which I think is £55 a year, or would probably be like
that's it. So basically, £55 a year, and beyond getting access to this is called the Alliance 01 because it's the very first Alliance collaborative watch. We're hoping other trade members will collaborate and also do a collaborative watch. The reason it's not something where the Alliance are top down saying you two brands should get together as make this is because both Fears and Christopher Ward, we're donating 100% of the profit from the watch sales. So neither brand is making a penny on this.
Oh, wow.
And to be honest, as a small business, we could only have agreed to do that at the stage we were. And, it's a huge undertaking to say, actually, we're going to give all the money away from this. But it's something that, as a founding member of the Alliance, I feel so strongly about what they're doing to help promote British watchmaking abroad, but also their new plans for helping to encourage more people to enter education in the horological sector, which, of course, for a company like Fears, on Tuesday, we break ground on our new workshop in Bristol. The builders come in and they start work for several months to get that all built. So actually getting more watchmakers trained up in the UK is absolutely vital. So it's a short-term loss as a company by not making any profit, but it's with the hope and the focus on a long-term gain for not just Fears, but the British watch industry. But yeah, you said £55, as well as getting access to this watch. You also get to attend different virtual and soon to be in-person events, which are exclusive, but also a subscription to Oracle Time magazine and GMT magazine. So, and either of those magazines cost more than £55 a year. So, there are some actual tangible benefits, as well as knowing that money goes entirely to help fund the Alliance and what it's doing. So if you're interested in the watch, all you have to do is go to britishwatchmakers.com, go to the join section, top right hand corner, pay your £55, join, and as long as it's all gone through by Thursday night, midnight GMT time, then you'll wake up on Friday morning to a password, and then it's being sold on a first come first serve basis. People have said, we've been inundated by people wanting to reserve watches, and we're like, no. I'll be frank, there are a handful reserved. Mike and I are having one. Roger's having one. We're part of. We created the Alliance, so we've gone. You know what? Actually, we want to have this on our wrist. But outside of that, it's strictly first come first serve, and we'll see if people like it as much as we do.
Oh, awesome.
I have a tangential question for you regarding this.
Yeah.
So I will be the first to admit that $4,000 is going to be a big ask for me personally. That's just outside of my purchase. But joining that as an American, you mentioned it. So not being local to you, what are the benefits for someone across the ocean, and how would they be involved or part of that?
Certainly. So if you're a club member, you get the magazine subscriptions. I think they probably will be digital subscriptions, but I'll stand to be corrected. You will get sent to you though the lapel pin badge and a signed certificate signed by Mike and Roger. And I've seen them signing these certificates. They're literally awesome. Sat there signing every single one. But then you've got what they call the open dial events. So the open dial event. So for example, this Wednesday evening, there is an event taking place which is live between Mike, myself, and it's being moderated by Justin Hast. And he's asking live questions, but also discussing this. But there's also lots of behind the scene footage that was recorded by the Alliance, who came to both Christopher Ward and to Fears to get sort of, footage of the watches being built and assembled. So, access to those. People will say, well, there's lots of online things and I don't have to pay for a lot of them. This is really going in depth, and, the way it goes behind the scenes, it's done in a very, very clever way that actually no one has come away not going, oh, I've learned a lot more. And don't get me wrong, I love doing Instagram lives, but this is all done, production standards. So it's done very well. And then there's things like, for example, the people who've renewed their membership to the Alliance for the third year running, they were all gifted a copy of the Watch Annual, the physical copy of that. So there's nice little benefits here and there, different events that come on. You can also attend virtually the events for the Horological Society of New York. We have like a partnership with them. So it's one of those things where there are actual benefits beyond, having access to the watch and the, the good feeling of supporting British watchmaking. And I think, the things are actually quite interesting, so
it's not, you're selling me on it.
Yeah, I'll leave
and I don't get any commission for people signing up.
No, I was like first getting to sign on, and I was like, does this apply to me? I don't know. Am I a part of this or not? So this is interesting. Yeah.
So, I mean, there's a reason why the things like the open dial event is taking place in the evening. There's a reason why the watch will be going live to buy through the Fears website at 3 p.m, is because there are, the international element of membership is huge. Okay. I mean, I don't have the exact figures, but at last count, I believe it was probably close to around 50%. So, it's fascinating and incredibly endearing to see how many international collectors and enthusiasts are interested. And I mean, you know, in the last couple of days, there's been an increase in obviously the number of people becoming club members, and it's just, you know, the Alliance are fascinated to just see where around the world people are looking and are noticing. And I mean, that's the thing. It's saying, yes, you know, as a British brand, you know, it's wonderful to sell to people in the UK, of course. But, you know, I was a week ago, I was out in California for 10 days with our Fears authorized stockist, Topper Jewelers in Burlingame. And it was incredible just seeing the number of people coming in. We did an event one evening. We had 60 people coming in who are all either Fears owners or Fears fans and followers. And I'm literally there going, oh my goodness, we've never done marketing in the US. And yet this is just incredible. So I think it's realizing that, you know, British brands, of which there's now 78 trade members of the Alliance. Think about that for a moment. 78 British watch and clock brands are part of it. It's important to us to realize, like, you know, as much as we love being on our tiny little island, actually it's really important that we do look outside to the world and realize that, you know, we're very lucky that people do care what we do here on this cold, windy stone.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'll leave the link to everything in the description down below. Thanks for that, Nicola. That's awesome. Okay, should we jump onto the main event? And the main premise of this show is Hodinkee released an article about their guesses for watches, but what's going to happen in the watch world this year. So we'll go through them, see whether we agree, and then perhaps we'll give it a probability score maybe, or we'll do a vote to see whether we think it's probable or not. So first up, they've predicted that Rolex will continue to utilize titanium in their production, or the Rollersaw or whatever it was called, their titanium.
RLX.
And sorry,
RLX titanium.
RLX titanium, that was it. And then their prediction is that they are going to do a 60th anniversary version of the Daytona partly in titanium. That's Hodinkee's prediction. So what did Dave go on? What do you think?
Where do I start? I mean, trying to predict anything that Rolex does by anybody is a fool's errand. So we'll start there and then kind of progress downwards from that point. If they don't, I would be surprised if they don't, as a brand, start to use titanium more widely, for the simple reason that more and more brands, whether it be, you know, Grand Seiko or Omega or lots of brands, are beginning to utilize titanium more widely. And, you know, it makes sense in many ways. You know, for me, the big reason that it primarily hasn't been used by a lot of brands is this kind of weird perception by the buying public that expensive equals heavy, which is this kind of cast back from the days of a premium watch was precious metal and it was weighty, and you still saw people that picked up the Grand Seiko Snowflake and thought, oh, they were amazed by it until they held it and were like, oh, it's too light, you know. But I think most of the world kind of got over that and realized that titanium is hypoallergenic, it's tougher, it's much lighter on the wrist. So from a point of view of wearing it and day-to-day wearing, it makes much more sense. So I'd be amazed if they don't. As to what they're going to use it in, that's the longest straw that you'll pull out of that pile. You know, if you ask me what they should use it in, now this is not a case of what they will use it in, but what they should use it in is the eventual rework, whenever it happens, of the Milgauss titanium, with it being, you know, an anti-magnetic metal, would be clever from a marketing perspective to be utilized in that watch. That's just a personal opinion. Are they going to do it? I've not a clue. But, you know, for me, that would be sensible. This whole thing about this anniversary one, can't see it.
No. What they should do, I think, if they are going to use titanium, what they should do is in the standard Sea Dweller, because I know people who've owned that watch and find it to be quite.
Well, do you remember Ben Ainsley wore a prototype titanium Sea Dweller in the 2012 Olympics in the sailing?
Oh no, I must have missed that. Oh, well.
Yeah, there was a picture of what is now Sir Ben Ainslie wearing a prototype titanium Sea Dweller, and that was a long time ago now. And of course, everybody jumped up and down and were like, "Woohoo! It's coming! It's coming!" And then it just vanished off the face of the earth. But that could be a good shout potentially. Would it be sensible to do it in a Submariner? Probably. The Milgaus, as we've talked about, could work for it. Are they likely to? Who knows? It could also be the other one that I think would be more sensible than this offering that they've put up would be like the new James Cameron, because that's a big chunky weighty watch, and everyone, okay, not everyone, lots of people that wear it comment it's very top heavy. Therefore, a titanium version of that could address some of those kind of wider wearability concerns in that watch. But let's be honest, it's Rolex, so they'll probably listen to all of this and go, haha, idiots, we'll do what we want anyway and carry on doing what they do.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. Anybody else have any thoughts on this one? Probability.
I do. I agree with Dave on a few of his points. I mean, during the 5 years I worked at Rolex in their HQ, I found it very interesting to see how they did launches. And it was always explained to me when they launch something new, look at how they do it. And I was like, what do you mean? They said, well, the very first ceramic bezel was on the GMT Master in 2005, but it was on the all gold version. Then you look at the two-tone ceramic bezel, the Pepsi, that came on a white gold only GMT Master. You then look at the new movement architecture, the 3200 movements, which are now across like most of the range. That first came out on a 36mm date just, all gold with different colored sapphires around the bezel. And so what I'm getting to is basically when they introduce something new, they want it for the first year or so to be pretty niche. And the reason is it's to see if it works and to see the reaction to it. So you don't want to be putting out these new ceramic bezels and two colors of bezels in a watch that's readily available in steel. You want it in gold. You want to make it expensive, because if you find out that actually in real world use, it doesn't really work, or it breaks, or it's gets damaged. Same with the movements. What if it turns out there's actually a flaw in the architecture? Better to do it with a very small group of people where you can manage it. Now with this, of course, it's titanium. Loads of people use titanium. So for this, I would think it's more a case of them looking at it going, what's the reaction to titanium on a Rolex? Because as David correctly says, a Rolex is meant to be heavy. It's meant to have that heft. So, they've probably looked at it and gone, actually, people are not adverse to a titanium Rolex, so that could see it leaving out. And I think the thing you said, David, about the Milgauss is fascinating. So the Milgauss and the Daytona are both some of the oldest movements still in production in the Rolex catalog. The Milgauss is still using a 3100 series movement, and I think it's pretty much the only model now in the entire collection that uses a 3100. So that is so long in the tooth for being upgraded to a 3200. Then you look at the Daytona, the 4100 movement, that series came out in 2000. Wow. That movement hasn't been touched since 2000. Now, the 3100 hasn't been touched since the 80s. But, the Daytona is using relatively old architecture movement for Rolex. So I think it would be interesting to see that actually this year could be when both those watches got a movement upgrade. And I think I definitely agree, David. Why not? Especially because when the Milgauss was first reintroduced, you didn't have the incredible, the Omega one with the 15,000 Gauss. Its competition was smaller, whereas now it's hot. So I could see there being a reason for both those being upgraded, and maybe one of them in titanium.
Well, okay. So the gist on this one is we think it's unlikely, very unlikely to be in a Daytona, but likely that they might test the waters with something else in titanium. Awesome.
Yeah, it just seems weird with the Daytona because they keep trying to push that up market. And titanium just seems more tooly.
Yeah,
odd choice.
Titanium titanium gives you the option to raise the price by $3,000.
Well,
That's what everybody else does.
they don't need any incentive there.
Yeah. So Orange Hands puts Daytona will be titanium and left-hand drive. Lefties are Rolex's new target market.
Yes.
Well, moving.
I'm on board.
Well, here we go. So next up, I think this is one that you wanted to take, wasn't it, Todd? This is the Tudor will play its greatest hits, but there's a little bit more in depth to this part, isn't there? Do you want to broach on it?
Well, I Tudor. I love Tudor, but the Tudor, as they progress, it seems like two things are happening. They're becoming more and more like Rolex, in that they're becoming less aggressive and less adventurous and more play in the hits. And I think the other component is that we're going to see everything like that rumor I mentioned. I think we're going to see everything go in-house movement. I think that we're going to see more and more introduction watches pulling off the market, and they're going to put that in-house movement again to be like Big Brother. But that's just a speculation on my part.
It depends how they've been investing in Kinesi to expand demand. Do we know if that Kinesi factory can actually make a lot more watches? Not sure.
Well, they're a large percentage owner of that factory, are they not?
Yes, but you've still got to.
They might be able to push them. They might be able to push other people out of the way.
I think it's unlikely they'll go full in-house, for the simple reason that things like the whatever you want to call them, the Royals or Royale range, which was primarily developed for the Asia market, and it is very price orientated, they'd struggle to maintain most of those retail price points if they went in-house with it, because they're very much that in the UK terms, just sub 2,000, just over 2,000. And I think if they went Kinesi in it, it'd start pushing easy into the 2.5 towards 3, which kind of kills that market off for it. But I think there's a few things might get a refresh. Their range is getting very wide now, but then in saying that, they've got a lot of boutiques. They're pushing down this whole Tudor boutique narrative, and you need to actually have a fair number of models in the range to justify having a boutique, because if you've got 10 models in your range, it makes for a pretty poor display in a shop. So,
well, the one thing that they do is interesting is that they have, of each model, they must have 10 or 20 different variants. So they do a very broad product offering with one. So it's an interesting approach they have.
Yeah. Well, next up we have, and I think we might have touched on this on our predictions, but it will be the Moon Swatch will lead to Moon something else. I like the way that they've guessed the names as well. They've got Moon Jeans, Moon Pain, Moonalton. So they are predicting that the Moon Swatch will be expanded to other Swatch properties. So I don't know what everyone thinks on this one. No, you don't think so, Dave? No.
They are still milking the cow that is the Moon Swatch. And, there's still plenty of people hunting for them. There's still queues outside Swatch stores. Like this morning, actually, I wandered past and there was people waiting at the doors to a shopping complex that there's a Swatch store in, and they were waiting there to go and stand in a queue for Moon Swatches. So there's still a demand there. They are not going to dilute that whilst that is still as it is. Are they likely to do something in the future? Probably. I think there's the potential that they might add a couple of special edition colours, or maybe some alternative colours into the whole, Moon Swatch thing, because that'd be super easy for them to do. Would they do something in the future? I don't think they'll go into any other brands, frankly. I don't think there's really any other brands that would necessarily work. Why would you? There's a big difference between doing a £200 and something $, bioceramic, kind of homage of the Speedmaster, when it's a £6,000 watch. You're not going to homage a Hamilton at £500-600 with a £200 plastic version. It just wouldn't work. Why would you spend £200 when you can buy the real one, inverted commas, for a few £100 more? I don't think it would work with things like Breguet or these kind of brands, or Glasuta Original, or anything else within the Swatch family, because quite frankly, there's not enough of a story to peg it to that means anything to the average Joe in the street. Whereas, you know, Moonwatch, Speedmaster, Omega, Moon, you know, Apollo missions are a story that kind of resonates with a lot of people. The only other one that I would be amazed if they didn't at some point do it with would be an Omega Seamaster and James Bond, because that's the one that is just jumps up and down and says, me, 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 here's a whole load of money, come and get it, please. And, you know, for me, you know, they've already done all the they've already done all the Bond themed watches with Swatch, with the Q watch, and, you know, et cetera, et cetera. I'd be gobsmacked if they don't do that at some point. That I think is for the future, though.
What about, David? One thought could be one brand they have that gets sadly not very much love, but has a huge anniversary this year, is Blancpain and the 50 Fathoms.
You know, by all accounts, yes, but I think where is the resonance? You know, I think if they did it, they'd literally sell a handful, because 99% of folk, not even 99.999 to the infinite would literally go, what's a 50 Fathoms and why should I care? You know, and the reality is, you know, I think one thing you shouldn't underestimate, you know this, Nicholas, you know, but the amount of money that they would spend on molds and R&D to come up with a 50 Fathoms, if you know you're going to sell millions of them, no problem at all. If you're going to literally sell, you know, probably low thousands, if they did a 50 Fathoms, it wouldn't pan out. You know, I just can't see the numbers people doing it.
I mean, I've been in a few Amiga ADs recently, and it's been fascinating when you're in there waiting and you're sat there, and in the course of about 30, 40 minutes, multiple people were coming in asking for the Moon Swatch. But what was really interesting was how the sales associates handled it, because I assumed they were going to be like fed up with this, because after I said to them, "Oh, do you get this a lot?" And they were like, multiple times an hour, every hour. This is just all day long. But what was interesting was they were really charming about it. "Oh, I'm really sorry, we don't actually sell the watch. If you go up the road, there's a Swatch store, like da da da." What was interesting was, and this was across 3 different ADs in 3 different countries, only once did the person go, "Okay, thank you," and left. Every other time they stopped and they then tried on an Amiga. And I thought that was really interesting. And clearly, like, you know, and I asked one of the associates, I was like, you know, does that happen? They were like, "Oh yeah, like 99% of people will then stop and try on a watch. They may not buy, but they will then try on an Amiga." And, you know, a lot of them have never tried on an Amiga before. And I was just like, oh my goodness, this is so clever. Like, just so clever. Yeah. There's just, I mean, we knew this might happen, but it is actually happening.
And they won't obviously reveal the numbers, but no. I have it on pretty solid authority that the number of actual Omega Speedmaster sales increased since that watch launched it's not a coincidence, and it's not a small number. And, you know, they have markedly gone up. The opening weekend, you know, when they had the suitcases in the window and folk thought you could buy them in the Omega stores as well. And of course they were going, no, it's just for display. They said even that weekend there was folk who then went to Swatch, realised they weren't going to get one, and came back and bought a proper Moonwatch. So, you know, it shows you this. People think it's not working. It is absolutely working for Swatch Watch, for Omega, and for the whole narrative. It really has worked.
So it just further proves your point that they've found a working formula. They've just got to figure out which watch they're going to do it with, again, to keep this going.
And I think it's unlikely they do anything with the bioceramic Moon Swatch concept this year, because they simply can't make enough even now. So
exactly.
Why would you put more pressure on every part of the supply chain when you've still got a winner? People at at Watches and Wonders will still be talking about how successful it was. It'll own Watches and Wonders for a second year, and it won't even be released. It's on the street.
And why would you dilute it in any way, shape, or form? You know, when you do something that works that well, just don't dilute it. And the bigger thing here that Omega / Swatch are doing is, you know, like that oft talked about thing is, if you stop the average person in the street and say, name a luxury watch brand, you'll hear Rolex more often than you'll hear anything else. And even the brands that we think are well known, most folk have never heard of them. This is absolutely making Omega more of a household name than it ever was before, to the point where it's not suddenly going to irpst, Rolex in those terms. But even if they get one person or two persons more that get stopped in the street that say name a watch brand and mention Omega at some point, they've done their job.
Yep.
That's the kind of success that you've paid for by selling people things, which is kind of that's the marketing grail. It's like, how do you spend the marketing money by people actually buying stuff from you? And so they've maxed it out there.
Yeah, and I was definitely a naysayer on the old Moonswatch, and I think I'm perhaps being proved wrong on some of the points that I made at that time. But sorry, Todd.
Well, and there's a comment in by Boresic Time where I think we're missing the point, where a 206-pound watch is equal to a 6,500-pound watch, as far as interchangeable. No, I think what Dave just said has nailed it. This is a phenomenal marketing tool. This has done huge things for Omega overall. They're not interchangeable. One's a toy, one's a real watch.
You said that whole interchangeable thing. They're not interchangeable in terms of quality of product. It's like saying a Ford Fiesta and a Formula One car are interchangeable. They're not. They're both cars. That's about as close as they get. The same as this. This is an inexpensive quartz watch and a nicely made mechanical watch, etc., etc. But don't forget, yes, there's lots of people who can afford £200 for a Swatch and can't afford £6,000 for an Omega, but there are also a huge number of people who can afford both. And if it influences people who can afford £5,000-6,000 watches to not buy something else and buy an Omega or buy that watch, they've done their job. So by that, they are very much interchangeable. It's just got people into that whole hype train thing.
Yeah, and for me, I think it's just an example of the Swatch Group managing the Swatch Group, not the individual brands. So people, we separate out it's Omega, it's Swatch, it's Longines or whatever. But I think more and more the Swatch Group is thinking about the whole group and not the individual brands. They need the individual brands to succeed, but they manage the group, whether it's the movement, ETA part. It's not just the individual brands, which is how we tend to think. Swatch Group manages the group, and this has been great for the group.
Yeah, good point. Well, the next one we've got up, I actually don't know a lot about this prediction, but it's that the Holy Trinity will refocus on steel. So this is Patek.
Nope, not going to happen.
Hey,
move on.
Seriously, I think that shows a real naivety, whoever wrote that, as in they're not reading the market and where the market is going, especially with those big conglomerate owned high-end brands like AP, like Vacheron, and Patek as well, because that's basically what they're talking about here. All of those brands, that Vacheron 222, I will literally eat one if they make it in anything but gold, because why would they make it in anything but gold? The gold version, they control how many they make. It's super profitable for them. They sure as hell ain't going to cheapen it by making a steel one. And as much as folk don't like to hear that, they are not going to cheapen it by making a steel one of that watch. They just won't do it.
Yeah.
Patek, the 5811 is in precious metal only, and they've said it'll only stay in precious metal. And they will, because why again, they don't. I don't think Patek didn't like what happened with the 5711 in steel. They actually, that's very un-Patek. AP, fine. The royal, the jumbo royal oak in a steel, that wouldn't necessarily surprise me at all. But you'll see more and more brands with their premium product move to precious metal only.
Let's quickly move on. Next one is Blue Dial. This will be the year of the Blue Dial, but I don't know whether, there's a lot of Blue Dials last year. Maybe Green Dial.
I'll take this one.
Go on.
This was Hodinkee needing an extra 500 words for the article. It's like blue never went away. Why is this even a prediction? It's like, blue is going to be the new blue. Well, blue is still the blue. It's just which shade of blue you choose. It's like
Yeah.
moving swiftly on.
Yeah.
Come on, Hodinkee, get a life.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Most
Mark,
watches come in black, white, and blue.
And always
that's
have.
Yeah.
I mean, it's literally like Model T Ford's been available suddenly in black again. It's like really? somewhat surprised me by this color combination.
It's all rage.
Blue's probably been arguably, if you decide that white and black aren't actually colors, then blue is probably the most popular color that's ever been used in a watch dial.
Yep.
Oh, I remember my dad, who was a graphic designer, when we were kids, whenever I would say I like the color of black, he would be like, no, the black is the absence of color. I'd be like, oh. Next up, Dave, I'm sure you might want to take this one, or Mark. Omega will address the bracelet on the Seamaster 300. Hodinkee are predicting they're going to take some of the weight out of it, add a little bit of a taper on there, make it a more wearable bracelet.
I mean, this might be possible if Omega launch a new generation of the Seamaster. But they won't do it until they do that. And I don't think 2023 is the new Seamaster year. Okay. Why would they do it?
I mean, yeah, I'm with you on that. In the respect of, I have a few of these watches, and the amount of people that absolutely bitch about the bracelet on this watch, I've never really had a fundamental problem with it. To be honest with you, it's if you size it properly, and the biggest thing they did in a good few years ago was they put the micro adjust in the clasp. Cool, that was kind of called for and that was needed, and that's kind of solved any of the issues. I've not got the hairiest arms in the world, but I do have hairs in my arms. I've never had my hairs pinched on my arm by this watch. I've got way worse watches for pinching my hairs on my wrist than this one is.
I mean, I think
the bracelet's super durable as well.
There were 4 prominent podcasters, YouTubers, who went off on the Seamaster bracelet. Mark and Jack, Oishin, 10 and 2, and one other. So 3 prominent ones. And like a lot of things in social media, everybody fell down the rabbit hole. And there's nothing wrong with this bracelet. It's got the micro adjust. I have my fair share. Never had a problem. As Dave said, you get them properly adjusted. It's a great bracelet.
Yeah. I mean, the other thing as well is this whole talk of, the taper. And yes, they have done it, to be fair, on the Speedmaster. They've brought out, they've kept the 20mm lug width and they've tapered it down significantly from where it was. It was previously 2018, and they've tapered it now to 2014, and it's 2015 on the steel ones. But if you look at brands like Grand Seiko, their new bracelets are all minimizing the taper. They're actually keeping a much more consistent width between the lug and the clasp, because actually it makes the watch much more wearable, because you've got a much stronger balance and a much better support. The problem if you've got a really narrow clasp on the watch is, especially in a bracelet, is if there's any weight on the head of the watch, it's going to dance around on your wrist like nothing on earth, because it's top heavy. The weight balance between the bottom and the top is way off, and actually it can be quite uncomfortable. I've got a few watches with quite narrow clasps in them, and if you've got a heavy head on the watch, the clasp begins to dig into you, because it's kind of, you have to have it tight to stop it moving around. That's why I find the bracelets in these personally really comfy. I'm sure there's a few folk who don't. That's the nature of bracelets. You can't win it all, but I don't see where the big issue in this is. And that watch, the classic Seamaster 300, is one of the best selling watches that Omega have in their range. And if it was truly a problem, they wouldn't be selling them, and they would have changed it well before now. Omega aren't daft. If something isn't working and it's stopping things selling, they'll change it.
Stop selling it, yeah. And the other thing is, if you make the taper too severe, that's a big clasp. And it's a big clasp because of the micro adjust. But the micro adjust makes it comfortable. So if you make it too narrow at the taper, you'll get that big jump to the clasp. And why would you change a clasp that works very well and makes the watch comfortable in all conditions?
Yeah, I agree.
And do you think they just made this one up, or do you think that they're going?
I think they're talking out of an unusual orifice.
It's another 500 words.
I think it's another classic. If you stick Omega Seamaster 300 into Google, you'll get a vocal minority who love to shout about the bracelet in this watch because, you know, that's the internet for you. But
well, it stops them shouting about the helium escape valve. So take your pick. Pick your poison on that one.
yeah. I mean, absolutely. You know, it's, you know, I don't get it.
You'll get this one.
Yeah. Next one is, and I don't know, Nicholas, you might want to take this one, but we'll the title here is "We will retire the term micro brand."
Yeah, I when I read this, I thought it was interesting because I think certainly, well, the number of new watch brands coming out in the micro brand sector is beginning to slow, and certainly when you talk to component manufacturers in Europe and across Asia, everyone is seeing the number of new people setting up watch companies slowing down. But I think this is combined also with the fact that quite a few micro brands, and it's a phrase I've never really liked because it is a bit of a sort of catch-all for anything new and smallish, but quite a lot have like matured over the years. So they reference Baltic in here, and you're looking at that and you're going, well, yeah, I mean, I don't think of Baltic as a micro brand. They started in that sort of micro brand area. They started on Kickstarter. I was one of the supporters. I got watch number 37 off Kickstarter, but they're certainly not a micro brand today, not in the way they operate. They have a showroom in Paris, a showroom in London. They're doing more than a lot of small independent companies. And someone said to me the other day, like, oh, they referred to Fears as a micro brand, and I've never really liked it as a phrase for what I'm doing personally, and that's not really out of snobbery. It's only because I think there are different brands set up for different reasons and stuff. But I look at what we're doing today and I'm like, yeah, we have an office, a showroom, a team of 7, soon to be 8, and soon to have our own workshop. I'm going, actually, some quite big brands don't have their own workshop. They don't have their own showrooms. It's like, so I think the retiring of the phrase micro brand, I think we're maybe getting to the end of the hype around the micro brand, as, global issues and across economies, has a bite. I think there's certainly, what I hear from a lot of watch dealers and, from a lot of collector groups is people are certainly this year kind of going, yeah, I'm not just buying everything I see, I am slowing down and I'm being more conscious. And I think what comes with that is this whole hype of micro brands. Well, actually, a lot of the big brands have caught up in terms of producing good stuff at good quality. I mean, you go back 6-7 years and yeah, there were some really, really good Tissot's, but Tissot wasn't a watch that was, really, loved by the watch collecting community. Fast forward to today and you've got one on your desk, Sam, the PRX, really helped change people's view on it. And that's not just Tissot, that's lots of other things. So I think there's a few things with this. I agree with it. I think the phrase isn't being retired. I think it's more the category has evolved a lot. And therefore you'll see less people talking about micro brands only because, there will be fewer brands that have traditionally fitted the category. A lot of the brands that have been going now for 6, 7, 8 years have now grown far beyond that. And then also that actually a lot of the big established brands are doing what traditionally micro brands were doing in terms of, creating interesting watches, creating things that are more collector enthusiast focused. So yeah, that's a long way of agreeing with what Hodinkee is saying there.
Yeah. And it's funny because
I was just going to say that the competitive space filled up. So over the last 5 years, just pick a number. Let's say there was room for 100 companies. Well, 150 entered, 50 went broke, and then the rest are fighting for growth. It's much harder to be a successful micro brand, to have your image, your dream visible on Kickstarter and all of that. And then you've got the big brands coming in as well. So I think the space filled up, which was inevitable. Now you're fighting over the small amount of growth that's left. And if you're fighting against Tissot, good luck.
And I've just seen actually a comment from Orange Hand, enthusiast brand over micro brand. I like that. I like that. I mean, I think the word does change. And, as you said, Mark, actually the stats for watch company, if you set up a watch company in year 0, if there are 10 companies set up in year 0, after the first year, 5 have gone. And by the time you get to year 5, there's 1 remaining.
Yeah, I mean,
so when you think of those stats, like I had a private party for myself on our 5th anniversary, just celebrating the fact that we had survived 5 years, because it is ruthlessly tough out there. Yeah. And people are now looking at it and going, you know, if you set up a brand on Kickstarter 5 years ago, there were fewer brands trying to go for it, and you were more likely to succeed. You were more likely to make your money, and, you know, and I think that's it. I think that's the thing we're seeing, is a lot of people who got into watches set up either a brand or set up something in the watch area. You know, we've seen how many new dealers have gone under in the last 9 months because of the pre-owned market changing. You know, I think a lot of people who kind of jumped in on the growing interest in watches, that's where the big change comes. You know, we're now in a far more mature market with people who have more knowledge than ever before. And, you know, it's the number of people getting into watches, I don't believe is continuing to grow at the pace it was, you know, a year ago.
I agree.
So yeah, bizarrely, I should be really scared about all this, but I find it fascinating. I've got a degree in economics, so I'm an economics geek when it comes to like analyzing and looking at how things change. And I just think you know, for any brand, whether they're big or small, they've always got to be, you know, innovating. They've got to be thinking. Mm-hmm. And I think if you're coming into it fresh today, you know, that people can do it. I mean, look at someone like Studio Underdog. You know, it's no it's no big secret I'm good friends with Richard Bank, but, you know, David, you know Richard as well. You know, yep. He is one of the people he's the exception to the rule of people setting up and failing. Like, he has progressed so quickly from being Kickstarter into being a proper brand. And, you know, right now he's recruiting his first member of his team, and that's incredible. Yeah. You know, but he's an exception.
And with the best will in the world, you know, like, people will call Studio Underdog a micro brand. He's definitely not a micro brand anymore. He's a micro brand by how many people he's got, but by output, he ain't no micro brand. You know,
but he also had a successful career as an industrial or product designer before that, so he knows how that design-led business works. Yeah. When we went to Ward and Round.
Yeah,
I was asking the new brands what their 3-year business plan was, because I didn't get a good answer from most of them. So yes, let's be polite and ask them, but I don't think they'll be around next year.
Yeah, nice. I think the word micro brand. That's okay. I think the word micro brand is I think the issue is that it's gotten a dirty taste in the mouth because of the mushroom brands, because of these ones that kind of pop up like that are on the watch gang world. I really look at like what Nicholas and Christopher Ward are doing. I call them boutique brands, because I look at someone who's doing something very specialized, but they have a clear, full rounded business model, as opposed to, let me slap together some imported pieces and boom, here's a watch, kind of like Brick Watch Company. But that's kind of, you know, where I see the difference between, you know, micro brand and boutique.
Yeah, and if Mike's numbers that he told me on the last live stream about the number of watches that he makes, Christopher Ward make more watches than Richard Mille a year. So, you know, they certainly are considered.
I can guarantee you one thing: Christopher Ward are about as far from a micro brand by what people think a micro brand as you can possibly imagine. They are one of the best run, and I'm not talking watch business. They're one of the best run businesses. Full stop.
Yeah.
And they are diversified and everything else, you know, and they just happen to play in a price pool that people more traditionally associate with micro brands. But micro brands, one of these phrases, it's a classic case of language. The phrase in itself is not intrinsically good, bad, or indifferent, but it's what people have attributed to the definition of that, you know. And you get people that say, oh, you know, if someone buys parts in and puts things together in small numbers and there's only 1 or 2 of them, then it's a micro brand. But if there's a big factory that's actually behind that brand, then that's definitely not a micro brand, because they've got a big factory behind them, you know. And then independents in Switzerland would get really upset if you call them micro brands, because they're not micro brands, because they might only produce 50 watches, but when each watch is like, you know, £25,000 or £100,000 a pop, then you ain't going to call that a micro brand by turnover of that business. It's just it's just a load of people attributing names to things they don't understand, and half the time they've no idea what the business actually is behind the scenes.
Yeah, it's a great point. Well, sorry, Todd, did you have a point before I go?
No,
on the
that's
last?
all.
Oh, awesome. Last one here they had, apart from their final prediction was
Go ahead, Todd, all yours.
But yeah, they're basically saying...
You're just not going to mute. Right, Todd, right, on you go.
So it says budget GMTs will probably continue, but they shouldn't. So Hodinkee's argument is that these lower priced GMTs shouldn't be called GMTs because they don't have an independent hour functionality. So they're basically saying anything under $1,000 shouldn't technically be called a GMT. So that's the premise. Go on, Todd.
Well, first of all, what a pretentious load of garbage that is. Secondly, the fact that they talk out of both sides of their mouth, because they do still like the Seiko collar GMT, but only Seiko is the only one apparently allowed to do it or make it or be one. It is an awesome complication. I love a GMT watch, and I love that Seiko just opened the doors to the whole wide world. And why do they feel like they get to sit on their high horse and be like, well, unless you can afford $1,000, you can't have a GMT. I don't understand where any of this sentence came from. So that's where I'm at.
And Hodinkee have not heard of the Miyota 9075.
Oh, yeah.
Which is the Traveler GMT at the same price point at the NH36. So
that's in the new Citizen, isn't it?
Yeah.
Or the Bulova. Bulova has one now.
Well,
it's really cool. Independent, yeah.
Yep. And it's, one presumes about the same cost as the NH36.
Yeah, it's not very expensive.
It's just innate snobbery. That's all it is.
Exactly.
It's just disgusting.
It's absolute BS. You know, where does it come from? It comes out the same hole that your waist comes out of. That's where it comes from. And it's just literally, it's awful. You know, who cares if it's not an independent moving, hour hand? Literally, who cares? How often do most people even ever use the GMT in any meaningful sense, or actually once they've set it, adjust it? They don't.
Yeah.
I've got GMT watches, and it's like 9 times out of 10 when I go to actually move it, I think, crap, where's the manual? I'm going to have to look up how I actually adjust this thing, because you forget, because there's no standardized way of doing it. If someone wants GMT because it's a bit of fun, good on them. Yeah.
For F1 season, I leave mine always set the GMT time, so I know what time to turn on ESPN in the morning.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, for me, who cares? It's like, if you like it and it does what it says in the tin, then great. Next thing they're going to be saying, don't buy a watch unless it's cost standard. I mean, it's ultimately not any different, is it?
Right. Right.
Same argument.
Yeah, spot on. Well, that was a really interesting show, and I've touched on this before, but Hodinkee's last prediction was that very few of their predictions will actually come true. So there you go.
Oh, that's possibly the only one that will come true.
That's the true statement from that article.
Well, that's awesome. Well, thank you. A big thanks to my panel. That was a really interesting show. Thanks, Nicholas, for joining and telling us all about the new watch there, and sign up to British Clock and Watchmakers Association if you're interested in getting that.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for being so active in the comments, and we'll see you next time on Casual Watch Talk. Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Cheers.
Bye.